My man right here, man. I tell you, Heather. I tell you, man. Alongside my brother Ed Gordon.
Oh yeah.
There's a couple of brothers in this business that I've always admired, even before I knew them, because I love their voice. I love their audacity, right? I love their vision. I love their autonomy. I loved everything about the way they moved. I love how they never ran in the face of adversity. I love how they stood up for who they are and still continue to do so. And this brother right here is somebody who I've stayed connected with over the years. And even if we ain't talking, I'm talking through my sister, the poetess, who we both share as a loved one in our families. The New York Times best-selling author, advocate, philanthropist, voice of the people, Smiley Audio Media. This guy right here is the blueprint, if you ask me, here to talk about the book, The Covenant with Black America, which was released 20 years ago.
Wow.
Please welcome back to the show, the one and only Tavis Smiley, man. Come on, man.
Sway, you are too kind. Heather, Tracy, nice to see everybody.
Yeah, good to see you again as well.
This is a serious production up in this joint, man.
Yeah.
Y'all got it for real.
Come on, man.
I'm in a little tiny studio out in L.A. every day. This is a production, man.
Well, you know, we took a ball of clay and molded it into a statue.
Yeah, I love it. And let me just commence right quick by saying everything you said about me, I say ditto about you. I have mad respect for brothers and sisters who exercise their agency and their right to self-determination.
Amen.
And when you stepped out, I mean, I look at all these folk now, and I ain't trying to call on names. I ain't trying to, no shade and, not casting any aspersion on anybody. But I look at all these folk now who are in the game doing what they're doing. But you're like the OG, man.
Yeah. Well,
You showed us how to control and own our own content. Prince was a friend of mine, of course. And Prince used to always tell me for years, Tavis, own your content. Own your content. Content is king. Before he died, we had a conversation. He said, I think I was right about the fact that content is king, but I now believe that distribution is emperor. Content is king, but distribution is emperor. And so you've shown us over the years how to own your content, how to control your distribution. So I bow down. I'm in this chair, so I can't get on my knees right
don't
now.
bow down,
but I'm
brother.
bowing
We're
down
bowing together.
Wow.
We're going to bow. We bow.
Man.
Well, thank you for that, Tavis.
I mean every word of it.
I received that, brother. Thank you, man. I talked to a good friend of mine, Chris, and he's a venture capitalist. And I never asked him about financial advice. Right, we worked on something else that was philanthropic, dealing with folks behind prison bars. And one day I said, we were talking about Bitcoin and all these different things when that was coming out, right? And I said, hey man, is that something you would invest in? And he said, I invest in the nuts and the bolts. I said, what does that mean? Like I acted like I knew what it meant, right? I didn't want to seem stupid, but the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's it.
And what Prince was on back then, saying that distribution is the emperor on the infrastructure. I sat with Prince for hours at one time, and he was warning me about the internet. And I was like, man, how you going, this is coming, bro. Right? He used to always talk about, but that's a black hole, Sway. You're investing in a black hole. Don't let it take over you. Why was Prince, like, how did he have so much foresight, man? Like, he had premonitions almost, right?
I've yet to figure it out myself. First of all, I miss him every day. I miss him every day. We used to talk all the time. I'm amazed all these years later at the things about which he was right.
Yeah.
So I've come to believe, here's my short answer to your question. I've come to believe that there are some folk who walk amongst us who are prophets. So I make a distinction when you talk about Dr. King. Dr. King was not a politician. He was, in fact, a prophet. And there's some folk who just have this capacity. It is God-given. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. It's an unmerited favor. It's just a gift, right? But they have this sense of the future. They have this capacity to prophesy. And there are artists who are like that. There are certainly individuals in a variety of spaces who just have this gift to see down the road. And I can't explain any more than that. Prince was just gifted in that way. So every time he spoke, I listened.
So I have someone in my circle that's like that. And I almost hate when she tells me stuff because it scares me.
Yep.
You know, and Heather B once told me that I was going to be doing something in my career. Yo, Tavis.
I love it.
It was something that was the furthest thing from my mind. It would require me to go backwards in order to go forward. It just no reason, no way, rhyme or reason would I be doing what she said I was going to be doing in a year's time. And I ended up doing it. Right, the universe aligned itself, and somehow I ended up doing what Heather said. I think she falls into that category.
So Heather, can you whisper in my left ear here?
You want 6 numbers for the lottery?
And somebody once wrote, tell me something good.
No, listen.
Yeah.
I always say
Yeah.
that's not anything, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. We had a guest recently that kind of said they don't believe in that kind of thing. But that's not anything that I certainly cannot take credit for. It's a gift, and we have to nourish our gifts. We have to be careful with our gifts.
That's right.
And so anything in terms of being obedient and just you feel these messages you want to share amongst your family and friends, you just do so. You're not looking for anything in return.
And and some folk, as you know, Heather, some folk don't have, how might I put this? Some folk don't have the courage to say what they see. See, just like there are folk who can see down the road and they will tell you that, there are other folk who will have a vision, again, not to proselytize, but the Bible we've already said, where there is no vision, the people perish. Somebody's got to have a vision, right? But there's some folk who get a vision and they're so scared of it that they won't step into it. Or they see things that they're afraid to say for the pushback that they may get, right? Somebody once told me years ago, Sway, Heather, Tracy, all of us, I think we can resonate with this. Somebody once told me years ago that the best ideas in the world can be found in the graveyard.
Yep.
The best ideas in the world can be found in the graveyard. Too many people go to their graves with good ideas, visions that they never pushed out. So you want to find the best ideas, go to the graveyard, start digging. That's where they are. But relatively speaking, so few of us actually ever step out on faith and do the things that we know we have the capacity, the vision, the idea to do. And that's why I said earlier, I started out by celebrating Sway, because again, there are a lot of people, trust me, there are a whole lot of folk. It is never lost on me that there are a lot more people than I could ever count who are far more talented than I am. I have people in my circle. My best friend from college, I hope he ain't listening right now. This Negro has more talent in his baby finger than I have in my entire body. And that is not a false sense of humility. This Negro can do 20 different things well and could have been a millionaire many times over in any one of those arenas.
Wow.
His problem was he never chose. He never decided he was going to focus on this particular thing, step out and do it. So I know that there are people who are far more talented than I am, but I committed myself to the vision that I see for how I can show up in the world. I work hard every day. I stay focused every day. And God has blessed me and things have sort of worked out.
Amen.
But it's not me being more gifted, more talented than anybody else. It's just again, it's just focusing on that thing that you're called to do and choosing it.
Tavis Smiley.
Staying disciplined, man.
Wow. The best-selling book came out 20 years ago. It's A Covenant with Black America, and then it was re-released this year. I want to tap into that because you gathered like an assembly of intellectuals and y'all explore racial disparities, healthcare, housing, environmental justice, all of these different topics that you covered in that book. Then I want to find out, where do you think Black America stands today? But before I do that, you remind me, Tavis, of growing up in the 70s, I had a lot of uncles, right? And my big brother, a couple years older than me. We're all the same, though. And I miss hearing Black men who have lived beyond 50 years speak. I just miss it, bro. I miss the camaraderie. I miss, the vulnerability. I miss the wisdom. I grew up with Uncle Stanley Waters, who I just talked to on the phone recently, and we talked for 90 minutes with my lovely auntie Shirley Waters. I miss my uncle Robert Waters, who's cousin Cleve's father. They fought in the Vietnam War. They went through the civil rights movement, the whole nine, and they just constantly fed us. And today we had a topic about elderly people, well, not elderly, but people who are older than you that give you information that has benefited you. And I hear all this talk about Black men, Black men voting, Black men this, Black men that. you know, and I feel like it's cheap. I feel like it just came around because of this political time. Hold up, man. Y'all ain't been mentioning us, you know, years prior, you know, and I'm curious, as a black man, you recently turned 60, right?
I did.
Okay. Give that man a round of applause.
Facts. You got to clap for that.
I'm clapping for that.
Come on, man.
It beats the alternative. Yeah, it beats the alternative. Yeah.
So, just your personal reflections on your life and career.
Yeah.
What were they?
Yeah. First of all, I'll give this to you. You can have this one for free.
Okay.
Whenever you're uncomfortable calling somebody old or talking about elderly, I use this phrase: chronologically gifted.
Okay, I like that. I was chronologically.
You can have that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Chronologically gifted. It sounds.
It doesn't roll so well, but I'll try it.
It sounds sweeter though.
Chronologically gifted.
Yeah, you're chronologically gifted. So
Okay.
it doesn't feel so harsh to people, I think, when you call them old.
Yeah.
But I agree with you though that it is amazing the things that we tap into, amazing the things that happen when you find yourself in a contestation, a political contestation, where you deem one person an existential threat to this democracy, and indeed he is, make no mistake about that. But the margins are so narrow. You know, when you see these polls and surveys and studies all the time, they tell you that these are the numbers. It's 47 to 45, but it's within the margin of error. We are not right now in the margin of error. We are in what I call the margin of terror. And when you're in the margin of terror, and people see this threat to this democracy, and I really call it an experiment in democracy. We're not quite a democracy yet. We have a Madisonian framework for democracy. We're not quite there yet. And in fact, we had time, we could really get into the fact that I think America is more like an oligarchy or a plutocracy with elections. That's a whole other thing. We're not really a democracy. Because in a democracy, for example, in a true democracy, the person with the most votes wins. Why do we keep doing this electoral college thing and not the popular vote? Kamala is going to crush Donald Trump, I'm certain, in the popular vote. But in a true democracy, shouldn't the person with the most votes win the election? Why do we do this? I understand why the framers initially set up that electoral college, but that thing is so outdated. The point I'm making here is that in an election that is as close and as tight as this one is going to be, when you're in the margin of error and the margin of terror, people start looking for who they can tap into to help them win. It has never been about them. And it ain't about them right now. It's about these individuals who are trying to win this contest. And anybody who you think, those persons who have been on the margins that you think can help you get across the finish line, then all of a sudden you come up with an agenda for them. I've said this, and I'll shut up. I've been at this for a while now. Never, Sway, in my professional career have I ever seen black men, to your point, talked about this much in a political season. Never. But then again, we've never been at this moment where the thing is so tight that you're going to need to steal somebody to help get you across the finish line. So all of a sudden, black men who I believe, and I sisters have been treated, horribly in this country, but I have always said that black men are the most maligned group of folk in the history of this country. And all of a sudden now, we are the creme de la creme. We're the group that everybody wants to play to. We're the group that everybody wants to fashion an agenda around. Where have y'all been looking out for the best interests of black men for all these other years, for all these decades, for all these centuries? Nobody cared. But now all of a sudden, we're the flavor of the month because we can help somebody win. I don't like it either. There's a bankruptcy in that. As far as I'm concerned, an ideological bankruptcy. But I see what it is. Now, having said that, am I thrilled about the fact that black men are being considered in this race? Absolutely. I love the fact that we're being talked about.
Yeah.
My question is, where you been all this time? And ultimately, this is what the book is about. If and when you win, whoever wins this thing, what happens next? Will we be forgotten? How do these black men who were talked about so much during the campaign get what they were promised? And how do these black men hold whoever the president is, how do you hold them accountable to what they said on the campaign trail? And that's the hard part. The easy part is to talk about black men, run commercials, do what we're doing now. The hard part is to hold the president accountable, and that's where we always fall down.
My man, Tavis Smiley.
Tavis, do you think, and I can only speak about the black men that are in my circle.
Sure.
I don't have the same story. I grew up with a mom and dad in a home. I have brothers. I have college, the whole nine. But I personally feel like black men, and for my generation, our generation, didn't start talking about voting until President Barack Obama. And then we also have now this internet thing. So maybe, would you almost say then that's probably when black men started to be considered in terms of campaign? Because I don't think it was just this campaign.
Yeah.
We have a lot of artists who have called the show. Shout out to DJ Premier. Shout out to everybody who called and said, the first time I voted was during Barack Obama's presidency.
Sure.
So do you think it started around then, possibly as well?
Well, it's a great question, Heather. The data tell us that black men have always voted in the same way that black women have voted. That's why I don't buy the argument in this race that Donald Trump's going to siphon off 20, 35% of black men. I don't see that. I could be wrong.
Okay.
I don't see it because black men, again, have historically always voted the same way black women have voted. We're family, right?
Yeah.
So if black women vote for Kamala Harris, my sense is the numbers are going to point out that black men largely voted for Kamala Harris. That's what we've always done. But it'd be a mistake to think that black men just showed up in the Obama era. No question about the fact when you have a black male running for president, you're tapping into something.
Okay.
So
right.
clearly, a lot of black men are going to be awakened around the candidacy, around the campaign that features at its epicenter an African American male. No question. But let's not forget about the civil rights movement, and even beyond.
Oh, yeah.
You remember the signs these brothers were wearing in Memphis? I am a man. Black men didn't just start standing up when Obama showed up. That's giving Obama way too much credit, and I ain't trying to hate on the brother.
No.
But black men were involved long before then. You think about the civil rights movement, and frankly, it was quite patriarchal and quite sexist. At the March on Washington, they didn't let women even speak. Black women, their own black men got to speak. But think of all those, the big six, as they were called, the black men who organized the March on Washington, who were running these campaigns, Bayard Rustin, Medgar Evers. I mean, our history is replete with black men who've always been politically engaged. But I think you're right about the fact that Obama did awaken something a little different for that generation. That's the point. For that generation.
Okay, cool.
But we ain't just showing up for the first time.
You better talk that. So let her know.
Of course not.
And I didn't think you were saying that. I didn't take it that way.
Right.
I'm just saying that I want to be clear that black men, for as long as there's been a fight for the right to vote and the right for us to exercise that right to vote, unfettered, black men have been in the forefront of that struggle. We didn't just show up around Obama, but he did tap into something, I think, for that particular generation. No question about it.
Tracy, to you.
Yeah, when Heather, thank you so much, Tavis. When Heather mentioned the internet, it makes me think also of the quality of our current media landscape, right? And how that can help to shape the storylines that politicians choose, for better or for worse. And right now, it seems like everyone has a microphone. Everyone has a camera. We're seeing politicians. I never thought that they would be doing certain podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. With this tremendous career that you have possessed and currently possess, can you speak about the core ingredients that go into a high quality interview?
Wow. That's an amazing question, Tracy. Let me answer it in two ways. One, I tell my team of people at my station in L.A. that if you want to be a great talk show host, you want to be a great interviewer, you want to be a great interlocutor, it's simple. The better you listen, the better you are as a host. I preach this every day. It's what I call generous listening, charitable listening. The more charitably, the more generously you listen, the better you are in this business. And the problem is that most folk who have those microphones, Tracy, are not interested in listening. It's about monologue for them, not about a dialogue. And when you pay attention to these conversations, it's like they have a blue card with 10 questions they're gonna ask. And they ask the first question on the blue card and they go down the card. It doesn't matter what the guest just said because you ain't really tapped in. You're not really listening. You just gonna get your 10 questions that your producer gave you out the way and you move on to the next guest, right? So it's about charitable and generous listening. Secondly, if you think that you are leading the conversation, you're doing it the wrong way. The host is never leading the conversation. You're always following. You get that first question out, and whatever your guest says, if you're listening, they're going to tell you where to go next.
Wow.
Generous listening. So you're not really leading if you're doing it the right way. You're following. Thirdly, and finally, to your question about the media landscape writ large, I'm I don't want to say I'm despondent and depressed about it, but the media in this country has let me down. And particularly in this moment, because all the media is ever interested in a political campaign is the horse race. They don't care about the issues. They just care about the horse race, right? And about the numbers. We never, ever get to really talking about the issues. And most importantly for me, the media has shown me time and time again that they are really not interested in seeking the truth. It's about playing to whatever audience they're playing to, but it's really not about a search for the truth, right? And so our media is in trouble. And I mean, we could have a whole other conversation about the Washington Post not endorsing this year, and the LA Times not endorsing. And I saw Jeff Bezos' op-ed the other day about why his newspaper, the Washington Post, is not endorsing.
What did he say in a nutshell?
What he basically said was that a couple of things. One, I'm just paraphrasing here, that newspaper endorsements don't really mean anything. Number two, that newspapers have lost the trust of the readers, and so they don't want to take sides. And he went on from there. My thing is simply this, and I could quibble with him and debate him and argue his points about this, but my question is, why now?
Right now.
Why in this race? Yeah. Exactly. Why in this race, in this moment, with a sister running for president and Trump as an existential threat to the democracy, now y'all decide we ain't endorsing. And the short answer is they're scared. Yeah. Because if Trump gets elected, they have so many other business interests. There's a billionaire that owns the Post, Jeff Bezos, an Asian billionaire that owns the LA Times, and they have other business interests. And they're afraid that Trump's going to do exactly what he says he's going to do. If you go against him, he's going to mess with your money. So there's a fear thing. They care about themselves, their money, not about the democracy. So we could debate this all day long. I'll shut up. But my point is, to answer your question, Tracy, our democracy is in trouble in part because our media is in trouble. And in any history proves this out. Every democracy, every empire, I should say, every empire in the history of the world at some point has its reckoning. Every empire eventually falters and fails. And we don't even want to believe in America that could happen to us. But every empire in the world has always fallen. And the first casualty in that process is the truth. And so the media starts looking the other way. When they aren't doing their job, your country, your republic, your democracy, your empire is in trouble. I'll leave it there.
Tavis Smiley, stop playing.
Sheesh, what
You know I'm from Oakland.
I love it.
Now you're from Oakland. You was talking about the Dodgers like all morning.
So?
By the way, I am taking credit for that last night.
Yeah, okay, how?
I flew in from L.A. last night.
That's right.
In time for the game, and the Dodgers win here in New York. So I'm taking credit for that. Yeah.
I say that because I'm voting for the sister. Yep. So, I'm not asking you who you vote for. I don't even want to know, but I like to say that out loud.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that.
Being from Oakland, that Kamala Harris has received my vote. And for reasons, not just because she's from Oakland and she's a sister, but that helps sweetens the deal for me. Yeah. But just the policy and the maturity I've seen her evolve into as she stepped into this role. And I've known her from before she was in this role, and we done community service together. And anytime I see a local politician in those streets, people try to bring up that other stuff. I saw her in the streets, and I didn't see the people who criticize her in the streets. So that's part of why she's receiving it. But this book came out 20 years ago. I want to ask you about some of the chapters and what has changed in 20 years. Let's talk about Covenant 3, correcting the system of unequal justice.
Not much. Not much has changed on that covenant. There were 10 covenants 20 years ago. When this book comes out, goes to number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, sells millions of copies. The first black book by a black publisher to ever reach number 1 on the Times list. That was 20 years ago. So this is 20 years later. Where are we on these 10 particular issues? I should say very quickly, those 10 issues that Sway is going through now, we have a bonus issue in this book. This is a sad reality. 20 years ago when we wrote this book, the issue of homelessness was not nearly as acute for our people as it is now. Here's the point, that in just 2 short decades, black people, black men in particular, have become the face of homelessness in this country. 20 years ago, it wasn't even on the docket. So we had to write a bonus covenant. So there are actually 11 covenants, not just 10 this time around, because we had to write a covenant about how we address this issue of homelessness that black men in particular are now the face of. But to your question about our system of unequal justice, not a whole lot has changed. We still see police brutality. We still see brothers being sentenced longer and more harshly. We still see brothers being put to death more frequently. So not a whole lot has changed in that regard. This book is sobering in a lot of ways. So there is some progress in some areas, but in that area of our system of unequal justice, not a whole lot, sadly, has moved in the last 20 years.
Damn, that is sad. Yeah. But if you compare it to the last 30 years,
that's right.
Be the same result.
That's exactly right. We have some serious issues with our system of injustice, as it were, and it's going to take a lot more than I think we're prepared to do to correct that system. Starting with having more of us inside of the system.
Yeah.
And this goes back to this election. One of the reasons why people are concerned about who's going to win this is because if Donald Trump wins again, he may get another 1 or 2 Supreme Court picks.
Yeah.
Clarence Thomas is now, 76? Samuel Alito is now, I think, 74. And they'd be wise if he won to step down, let him appoint 2 younger conservatives, and they serve for the rest of their lives, right? So our whole system is rotten from the top to the bottom. And it's sad because for years, when you looked at the data, you got the executive branch, the legislative branch, as we all learned in school, and the judicial branch, 3 branches of government. The judicial branch, for the longest time, still was respected and regarded and revered more than the other branches. Nobody respected Congress. Nobody respected the executive branch, the White House. But people still had respect and regard for our judicial system. Those numbers are now in the toilet. And if you look at all the decisions they've made the last few years, you understand why.
Yeah.
So there is no branch of our government. We talked earlier about how much in trouble our democracy is. How do you sustain a democracy when you've got a demos? You got fellow citizens who don't trust any branch of their government. That's where we are. It's really sad. So our justice system is rotten from the top to the bottom. Sorry.
I like how you gave context of why you believe that. How much does establishing a system of public education in which all children achieve at high levels and research their full potential, how much is that a factor of where we are as a country? Because you're talking about civil studies, you're talking about government. These things no longer exist like it did when we were coming up in public school curriculums. Yeah. How much is why not?
Yeah. Our civic IQ, it's a powerful point. Our civic IQ is wanting. Our civic IQ not nearly as high as it ought to be, not nearly as high as it once was. And so that is an issue. And you're right. So many of these courses are just not being taught to kids in schools these days. But broadly speaking, in terms of what we cover in the covenant about education, that achievement gap still exists. The gap between black and white in our education system is still as wide as it ever was, really has not shrunk. And everybody thinks the answer to the problem, as my big mama would say, the answer to the prayer, they think is privatizing schools. And the data shows, again, that is not working because the majority of kids in this country, certainly black kids, are now and will forever be in public classrooms, not private classrooms, not charter schools. And I ain't hating on private and charter schools. I'm just telling you, I've learned over the years that the schools that do best in this country are the schools that parents are involved in. When the parents are involved, the schools do better, no question about that. But black kids are always going to be, for the most part, in public schools. And so long as we don't find a way to fix public education in this country, our kids are in trouble. And so this gap, this achievement gap between our kids and everybody else continues to persist. Again, as I said, the book in many ways is sobering, but you write these books because you got to keep track of the struggle, right? I believe that if nobody speaks the truth, then the suffering of our people gets rendered invisible. If you don't speak the truth, then that suffering just gets rendered invisible. And so the reason why you write a book like this 20 years later is to track where you are. Are you making progress? Are you gaining any ground? So in some ways, the book can be depressing, as it were. It's, as I said, sobering, but somebody's got to be tracking how we're doing and not doing so we know where we're headed.
This will be my final.
Sure.
Covenant 10. And I don't know if I don't know if we're aware enough of this topic, closing the racial digital divide.
Yeah.
Why was this chapter important to you to write, and can you break it down?
Yeah, 20 years ago, we were wrestling with this question of how fast they were going to wire our communities, right? Broadband, remember that conversation?
Right.
And so 20 years later, we've made some progress in that regard. Everybody these days has a smartphone. I'm looking around this studio right now. Everybody got a phone in their hand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's just true of the world, right? Everybody's got a smart device. So we've made some progress in that regard. I think what Tyrone Taborn, who writes the essay in that chapter, gets to ultimately is that in 20 years, we still have marginally improved, only marginally improved in moving sway from being consumers to being producers. And that's the conversation. Every time you mentioned Bitcoin earlier. I kind of chuckled when you said that.
I noticed that.
Yeah, because I was thinking, because every time something comes online, there are a bunch of black people preaching, we got to get in on this now. We got to get in now. We cannot be like we've always been, consumers and not producers. And so the Bitcoin thing jumped off, and everybody's like, this is an opportunity for black folk to get in right now, right, to control their own destiny. It's a new, it's a revolution. It's a revolutionary idea, rather. They said the same thing about the internet, right? Same thing about technology. We got to get in now so we don't end up as roadkill. I remember this great line. What was the line? We don't want to end up as roadkill on the information superhighway. It was a great phrase, right? Get in now. Well, the reality is that we've gotten in the game, but at the level of consumer. And while there are a lot more black people than there were 20 years ago who are owning and producing and designing and creating, we are still, more in the consumer category than the producer category. And Tyrone also writes about the fear that we ought to have of AI. Yes, there are a lot of things it will do that will make our lives easier, but there's a fear that black folk ought to have when it comes to AI. He talks about that in that covenant as well.
I love this. The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later. This is the name of the book, compiled and edited by Tavis Smiley.
Damn.
Our good brother right here, Smiley Audio Media. Where can they listen to you?
So all of our socials for our station in L.A. Is KBLA 1580. KBLA 1580 is our station in L.A. All of our socials can be found there. And, of course, for me, Tavis, anything and everything.
Tavis, say hello to my sister from Morris Media.
I will tell
the
her.
Poetess.
You saw her. You had a big celebration a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
So,
we got an ad in the magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I put one in there too, celebrating her 10 years, Felicia. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because black media is more relevant and more necessary now than ever before.
Yes.
There's some questions that don't get asked if we don't ask them. Some issues that don't get raised if we don't raise them. Black folk doing great work that don't get profiled if we don't profile them. So black media is more relevant and necessary now than ever before. It's why I did my move with our station in L.A. and I celebrate Felicia and her 10th anniversary. So
Dominique Dupree.
We're all trying to do our thing, man. We're all trying to do our thing.
What you, brother? Dan, thank you, bro, for coming by,
Love you.
man. Love you, family.
Tavis,
Tavis
Tracy, thank you
Smiley.
for having me.
Okay, man.